Welcome to the Dublin Book Festival. I'm Julianne Sarin, the Festival Director. I'd like to invite our panel for today, James Hudson, Fiona Lee, Aoife Martin and Kit Frya to the stage, please. Thank you for coming this morning. I always think on the Sunday morning of an event at 11 o'clock, who gets out of bed and comes to an event? So thank you so much. I know a lot of people have opted for the live stream today, so you're probably watching from your bed and we're very jealous, and you're probably having coffee. So, but welcome, and we're going to be inviting you to send us in questions today. I'm delighted to have this event, really important event, your favourite Irish trans writer. I just want to thank James Hudson for putting the event forward and really guiding me on this. So thank you so much, James. James is your host for this morning. James is an author and is also a librarian at the Small Trans Library. So enjoy the event, and thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I'm James Hudson. To those who don't know, I also work in Smock Alley Theatre as an usher. So you may have seen me at other Dublin Book Festival events this week. I've also never been on the stage with the lights on before, and I did not realize how blinding they are. So if you see me squinting really hard, that's not like a personal slight. Welcome to the stage, my three beautiful panelists. So would you all like to introduce yourselves kind of in a few words? Aoife?
Sure. Hello, my name is Aoife Martin. I primarily work in IT, but I'm also on the board of TENI, which is the Transgender Equality Network Ireland, and I'm a columnist with the journal.ie.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Kit Frya. I write poetry. I'm a lecturer at Dublin City University in the School of English.
Hi, I'm Fiona Lee, and I'm from Cove. I'm just off the bus. It's nice to be up in the big smoke here. I'm a writer myself. I have a memoir that needs publishing, so anyone who would like to speak to me afterwards is quite welcome to. Thank you very much for having me.
Excellent. I have a few of your works here. I don't have any of Fiona's yet. We were discussing this beforehand, that a lot of your work is online, and so you've found unexpected readership in the US.
I've got 6 fans in America. Yeah.
But it's really excellent kind of to be able to reach that far, because we have this kind of, I think in Ireland specifically, we have this kind of prestige around print publishing, but like,
yes, yeah.
You can get an audience that you sort of never would have by publishing online. So I'm honestly really happy for those Americans.
You can make a tiny, tiny difference.
Exactly,
to
yeah.
someone's day. It's amazing. Yeah.
So I have a few questions that I prepared ahead of time. And they mostly revolve around the fact that we're trans and in Ireland. As
Really?
Right. So just kind of start off, I wanted to know, do you have a favorite Irish trans writer, if not a favorite trans writer in general? And if I'm totally putting you on the spot and you can't think of anyone, you can say me. That's totally fine.
Okay. I like William Keown's work.
Okay, yeah.
When we had that Nullag na Man kind of get together, I thought his work was really, really, really good. I would go for him.
Yeah, he's a poet and essayist and general writer from Limerick. Really excellent. Has
really opened up his experience. It was fantastic. Amazing.
Yeah?
Well, I'd just like to say that I was participating in a sort of workshop and mentorship program organised by the Small Trans Library and the Trans Writers Union just the other day, and I met 5 amazing trans writers that evening, and I think they're some of my favourite Irish trans writers. I wanted to say a little, just in the sort of wider kind of Celtic diaspora. One of my favourite writers is Harry Josie Giles, and I'm sort of saving up her poem, novel, travel deep wheel Orcadia for Christmas as a kind of a treat. But it's got a lot of interest recently. Yeah, so that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm
to
very
reading.
excited for that.
Yeah, so I suppose I'm not terribly au fait with a lot of Irish translators, bizarrely enough, but like probably one of the best books I read this year was by Tori Peters, Detransition Baby, which was longlisted for the Women's Prize, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Tori for a book festival, and she's just such a fascinating writer, and she's got a new book coming out in 2023, I think, so I'm looking forward to reading that. I think she's certainly someone to watch, and I think she's opened up the area of trans writing to a lot of people who wouldn't have otherwise been aware of it.
Yeah, Tori's next thing, as far as I know, is a collection of novellas. It'll be The Massacre, Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, and 2 new ones, which novellas aren't an especially sellable format for books, but also I think a lot of trans writers work in kind of that short form.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting, like that those 2 novellas were originally published online,
Yeah.
and in Detransition Baby, she mentions a site called Fiction Mania, which probably a lot of trans writers would be aware of, and probably a lot of people might, just publish their own stories on there, and I think online writing it's a great way for trans voices to get out there, I think, and I think that's important.
Speaking of online, I should have said earlier, to all our live stream viewers at home, so good to see you. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi.
Hi. We also will be doing a few questions towards the end of the event, and I'll be able to take them all from the live stream as well. So if you are watching at home and you have any thoughts, comments, questions, please feel free to drop them in throughout the event, and then we can respond to them at the end. But yeah, I feel that online writing has been a really kind of creative area. But do you feel that it is kind of as seen in Ireland? Like, do you think that Ireland is still kind of stuck to print publishing as like quite the standard of authenticity?
Have you heard of Medium?
Yes, yeah.
I'm on Medium. And I think that it's helped me find my voice. And I have written some critical articles about the gay scene and transgender scene in Cork. And I have had it printed, so my 6 fans can read it. But no, I know for a fact that no one in Cork is reading it. So in one way, it's great to be able to be cathartic and get out there and vent your spleen in wonderful stream of consciousness prose, by the way. And it's great, but no one will say the object of my disdain would not be reading it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's wide open, but it's very, very wide. I feel.
Aoife, most of your work would be online, but like in journalism, right? Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to call myself a journalist as such, because a lot of stuff I write is more sort of, it's personal essays, and I've been lucky enough to be published in various publications, various magazines and newspapers, and I'm now a columnist with the journal.ie. So a lot of stuff I try to get away from just writing about trans issues, because I want my writing to be a bit more broad, I think, because trans writers, I think, shouldn't have to constantly write about their pain and write about the difficulties of being trans. We should be able to write about any subject that we're interested in, because we're human beings. We're interested in lots and lots of things, So maybe, why can't we see trans writers writing about maybe their favorite movies or a favorite book or doing book reviews? It was very disappointing when when John Boyne's book came out, that nobody asked a trans writer to review it for one of the national newspapers.
Oh, it's
I mean, why not? Why shouldn't a trans writer be reviewing a book like that and giving it a fair review from their perspective? But the Irish literary scene is very, very. It's a small scene, and everybody knows everybody, and it's the same with then consequently the Irish trans writer scene is even smaller still. So it's I think we need to try and break away from all of that, and try and make our work more broad. At least that's certainly my feeling about what I want to do with my writing, and just make it more, touch a lot more people than just necessarily the trans community, I think,
Yeah, we were just talking in the green room about one of the mentees in the program who was a hot air balloonist in a past life. So definitely would love to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But have you ever felt, in my personal experience with pitching essays, I find that pitching essays can be a lot easier than submitting fiction, because with an essay pitch, you just kind of have to say, this is what I'd like to write about, whereas with a full short story, you have to produce the entire thing. And it can be easier to kind of sell your kind of trans story. I had actually a point here about how a lot of acclaimed trans writing is nonfiction or realist fiction, like Detransition Baby, which has come a long way since the early transition memoir, which was in kind of early days like quite instructive to cis people about like what a trans person even is. But do you find that knowing your audience kind of by default, by statistics, will be largely cis? Like, have you ever found that would affect your writing? Or I know, Fiona, you probably would have had like kind of more of a niche, but Kit, like you would go more into poetry and academia and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my writing was done before I came out as trans, so I had I had the academic audience and a poetic audience before people knew and before I knew properly, I think. So I think that's quite a different experience from others who might just be starting out and are trans writers from the start, if you like, and the expectations might be quite different. So for me, that it hasn't been a particular problem. I don't think that I'm expected to sort of kind of put my trans self on show for an audience. I have noticed that I have that in the last kind of year or so, I'm getting invited to panels to talk about trans things.
By me.
And at work, I'm occasionally sort of the diversity. I'm sort of the diversity tick box, which is very funny. Being a white bloke, being the diversity the diversity candidate is a bit strange. Yeah, I think it's slightly different for me. Coming out relatively late in life. And not being in particularly marketable genres, I've largely sort of dodged that bullet. But I think it's a huge thing for most trans writers to kind of just to be allowed to write about what you want to write about, to be a writer. But that's probably very true of anyone who doesn't fit society's defaults, that they're expected always to, migrant writers are expected always to address the migrant experience, for example, as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, probably one of the first things I ever wrote for the journal was just about, being alone at Christmas, but not necessarily being lonely, and I think that spoke to a wide audience, I think, so it's not just, obviously it speaks to trans people because, various, trans people, generally tend to be alone a lot because, they might be kicked out of their home or, various difficult home situations, but it also speaks to a lot of, the mainstream audience too, so I think, and I think that's a lot of where my writing has been, is just focusing on, stuff that interests me, and not necessarily just, obviously everything I do is, I view it through the prism of being trans. And I will talk about being trans and talk about, how crap our healthcare system is for trans people. But also, I do want to write about what interests me, just as a person, not necessarily as a trans person.
Fiona, you're working on a memoir. So
I have finished.
Sorry, you
well,
finished?
kind of. It's never finished, but yeah.
For you, was the experience of writing the memoir was a lot more like internal, right? Like you weren't kind of thinking like, I'm going to write this so cis people understand what a trans person.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, because
how did you come to that? Yeah.
I think because today is basically my coming out. I've never ever appeared before as Fiona. So, thank you. The 14th of November 2022 will be my first Traniversary. I didn't write the memoir to kind of explain, how would I say, an autopsy and what it means to be trans. I did it as what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. And also, I've got a really kick-ass story, and I know how to actually articulate myself. And as I was saying to James in our adjoining dressing room,
we were gossiping.
I know we were gossiping. What did I actually say to you? Sorry, I got a bit blank. It was basically. I'm after losing my train of thought. What we were.
I think you were talking about how you were an actor and that this was.
Yeah. Whatever about that, but the whole thing about the memoir was. Oh yeah, I said it was being transgender for me is an epic version of self-care.
Yeah.
And the amount of things that I've learned by digging into myself and becoming trans has been amazing. It's revolutionized my life. And yeah, we are alone at Christmas, and we are alone a lot of the time. But I always call that a strategic retreat, because we have to kind of like build ourselves up. But to answer your question about the memoir, it's not a transgender memoir as such. Being transgender is one thing. It's also about punk rock in Beijing, and it's about massage parlor cum restaurants in Thailand. It's about everything. It's about being human.
I thought you were going to say it's not a transgender memoir, it's the transgender
Oh, really? Yeah. No. That was Juliet Jack.
Well, that's actually, so I also wanted to ask, I'm going to make everyone shame themselves.
Good.
I was curious, are there any classic trans books that you have not read yet? And I will openly say, I've been struggling with Stone Butch Blues for about a year solid. I've not read Whipping Girl. I have a lot of blind spots. And I think
That's good, because I've never even heard of it.
I think you were the one who told me about Testo Junkie.
What was it called?
Testo Junkie. There was, I think.
No.
It came up at an event, I think, that we were doing with the Trans Writers Union. But that was another one that I also hadn't heard of till.
I did say one thing.
Yeah.
I did say one, but I can't remember. But I was reading. Did anyone hear of a woman called Jane County?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the lead singer with the electric chairs. Mm. She wrote a memoir called Man Enough to Be a Woman. And I loved every second of it. Every sickening, squelching, delightful Berlin in the 70s kind of thing. I loved that. I felt proud to be a transgender performer when I read that book.
Good.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, do you have any blind spots?
Classically, of course, admitting that you haven't read things, the sort of that David Lodge novel in I can't remember which one it is because I haven't read it. It's about a professor who ends up playing this game where you admit progressively how many classic books you haven't read, and it's a Shakespeare scholar, I believe, ends up admitting that he hasn't read Hamlet and gets sacked. So it's very dangerous for me to admit, but I mean, there are absolutely loads of books I haven't read, shameful books I haven't read. Yes, I think I haven't read Juliet Jack's book. That's true. There's so many books that I know I haven't read. But that's just that means that there's an enormous field out there just to explore.
That was going to be my point exactly. Yeah, that I think a book festival is cool, and I love it, and I love being here. But I think we all need to admit sometimes we can't read everything.
No.
I can't. And there is a huge kind of amount of writing out there that is almost not clear to us. Is there anything that you've kind of had on your to-read list for?
I have Juliet Jack's book at home, but I have yet to read it. There's lots of stuff I haven't read. And I don't know if the other two panelists listen, but one of the things I'm wary of is reading too much trans stuff, because in case it influences my writing. Whereas, because when you're writing, you want your voice to be out there, but if you're reading a lot of, so you can obviously take on influences from other pieces of work, and then you go, oh, was that my idea, or was it because I read that particular book? So I'm very, very wary about reading other trans writers at the moment, because of the stuff that I want to write myself. I don't want it to overly influence what I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't even consider myself to be influenced by any trans. If you ask me, my influence would be like Ed O'Brien, to be quite frank.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Kev.
No, I was just saying, I don't know if it's even that thought out for me. I just sometimes jump back from, sort of the thing that should be absolutely your jam. It's somehow, you feel this kind of risk. No, I don't want to read that thing, because it does seem so, kind of pointedly the sort of thing that you should read, either because it's a trans thing, or because it's a poetic thing, or because it fits one of your other interests. I sometimes feel this kind of bullshit. No, I'm not going to. I just sort of jump back from.
Oh, yeah.
Things.
Like my
But
friend.
there's also, the fact that we're, as trans people, we live the trans experience every day, and you just sometimes you just want to go, oh God, I don't want to read another trans how awful things are, and how shitty childhood was, and it can be, you just want, like I read a lot of fiction, but I couldn't write fiction, and therefore I also don't read a lot of memoirs, because I'm not a fan of general, I was born here, blah, 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 I went to school here, I did, I just find that generally boring, like Fiona's book sounds amazing, and I'll definitely read that when it comes out.
Cool.
But generally, I would tend to read a lot of fiction, and I'm much more interested in reading essays as well when I read non-fiction,
Oh yeah, I'm a fantasy writer, so preaching to the choir here. I don't remember the last time that I read a memoir, and Detransition Baby even was like, just so, especially having read Tori Peters' more sci-fi novella, it was so ardently realist that I was really kind of like shocked by how just kind of, one-to-one to reality it was compared to her other work. But kind of on like the topic of trans writers and reading or not reading them, especially because I think it is relevant in that context. When you have read other trans writers, be it Detransition Baby or anything else, have you ever felt that you've gotten something from them that you wouldn't get from other authors? And specifically because some authors that I've asked, some trans authors specifically, have suggested that, transness does not have a uniquely definable quality that comes across in writing that makes their work jump out to you more than anything else. Whereas other people that I've talked to, if they know that an author is trans, they have an immediate kind of kinship that makes them kind of connect with the material more. So I'm curious, have you had either of those experiences where you've kind of recoiled from something because you've gone, we've actually got nothing in common even though you're trans, or vice versa?
In terms of reading?
Yeah.
Because we don't really read that many trans writers, but it was Angela Carter's Passion of a New Eve that I was saying to you about the whole thing. I found that, she's not trans obviously, she's like second wave feminist I think or something. I recoiled at the complete and utter rage of that book. It's a really, really ugly book. But that's all I can say about that. It's good, other things are good by her, but that book was the rage I couldn't. I recoiled, but that's as far as.
Yeah, like I tend to, my sort of literary upbringing was, I started off reading a lot of horror fiction, and developed into sort of fantasy science fiction, and then I read a lot wider as well, but there are a lot of writers in there in those genres who are trans, and who most people mightn't necessarily know that they are trans, like Poppy Z. Bright and
Caitlin
Kieran was another one. Like she was born in Skerries, I think, so. But she doesn't go around, she's not somebody who's seen as a trans writer. But from the fiction of hers I have read, I don't notice any trans influences in there. But I presume that there are. And I think it's nice to know that there are trans writers out there, and that they're just writing, I hate to say ordinary books, but they're just writing books that aren't necessarily trans themed or trans related. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I had one of the experiences I had recently was reading Schola von Reinhold's Lot, and that was one of those things that in some ways it was very much my jam in the sense it's a very literary novel, and it was sort of a very a novel that was had a lot to do with sort of fin de siècle and early 20th century kind of decadence and these sort of exquisite these sort of exquisite artists, and it interested me in the sense that it also dealt with the experience of trans people of colour, and very much sort of positioned positioned blackness in particular as almost on the side of the exquisite, the aesthete, the ornate, and against a sort of very chilly white brutalist minimalism, which is something I'm also interested in. I'm also sort of interested in kind of modernism. I like brutalist buildings. Interested in sort of experimental poetics, and so I felt. Neither of these camps really quite, I kind of fitted into them, but I could sort of, it's very funny, it was very funny and very satirical about some things that were quite close to my heart in the sense of experimental poetics. So I felt, like I was being, in a sense, I was being got at, but on the other hand, I was, I was very much kind of interested in the. In the novel's sort of poetics, and that was one that had me kind of not sure which side I was on. It was a
I
great
expected
experience.
people to say controversial things today, but nothing so out of the ordinary as I like brutalist buildings.
You should come to Cove.
Yeah, as a UCD graduate, I'm sick of brutalism.
Well, I think the thing about brutalism actually is
I love
what
this.
got me into it was that almost everyone can say about something kind of some elegant Georgian facade. Oh, that's that's nice. That's beautiful. Or some kind of big stonking Victorian building or some nice little cottage. But actually, there's no consensus. There's a consensus that brutalism is ugly, but there are good brutalist buildings and bad brutalist buildings. So it's a real aesthetic challenge to work out which is which, because there's nobody out there saying this is a good one and this is an awful one. So it was snobbery that got me into it in the first place. Was actually I'm going to actually test myself as an aesthete to tell the good from the bad, and yeah, it just sort of went from there.
God, I hope you write about this.
I mean, obviously there are big fans of brutalism out there, who know a lot more than I do about architecture. But I think on the whole, UCD is bad. It's very kind of. I think people think that all brutalism is people-unfriendly architecture, but I don't think that's true. I think you can make a very, human kind of brutalism, if you like, or a very human kind of modernist architecture. UCD with its kind of blind alleys to prevent another 1968 and things like that. Not so good.
God, I can't express how much I wish I could say on this. I look forward to pitching brutalist-themed panels with you in the future. So speaking of Lot, actually, and Detransition Baby, and sorry, what is the Jane County book called again?
Man Enough to Be a Woman.
Exactly, yes. There have obviously been more kind of prominent, visible trans literature in the last, I want to say 5 years or so, even. Mm-hmm. And some people have called this the golden age of trans literature. LIKECHARITY wrote a really good article kind of exploring that concept for Extra. And it's often represented with, the likes of Detransition Baby being on the long list for the Women's Prize, and Lot, I think, won the Republic of Consciousness Prize. It won a prize.
Definitely. Yeah. Prize winning. I never pay any attention to prizes, I'm afraid.
I have to, because people ask us what books we have in the library, and I can pitch them on that. Do you see something like that coming to Ireland, or do you think Ireland has a different relationship to literature that, say, Tory Peters has had in the US, or even Sean Fay, that was the other one I was forgetting, that Sean Fay has had in the UK? Do you see kind of that golden age hitting Ireland, or will we kind of maybe have a different experience?
Oh God, I hope so. Yeah, no, it'd be great. I mean, obviously Sean Fay's book is wonderful. I think the Great Irish Trans book is out there somewhere, and maybe someone on this panel will write it.
Maybe.
We're gonna have to duke it out.
But it's definitely there. I think it just has to find its way into being published, or even possibly being written yet. So. And I think it's only by seeing trans writers out there, by trans writers being published, and by getting their names and voices out there, that maybe there's a young trans kid out there with an absolutely brilliant book in them, and if they start seeing trans voices and trans writers out there, they'll go, hey, I can do that.
Yeah, that was how I came to writing kind of seriously, was when Anne Mulhall invited Imogen Binney, who wrote Nevada, to UCD, and that completely changed everything for me, kind of seeing like, oh, this is someone who's...
Yeah, I think that's been republished next year, I think.
I believe so, yeah. Little Post Press have kind of gotten a lot of topside press things. Sorry, this is press talk now.
Sorry.
Yeah, Kit and Fiona, do you, what do you think of kind of the Irish Golden Age?
Well, the Irish Golden Age. Well, firstly, I think if this was, we'll say, we're considering 5 years ago, and how we've come on Ireland. I was in China for years. I was living in Beijing, and my friends kept telling me, "Oh, Ireland's the place to be if you're LGBT, whatever." And I'm going, "What? That whole of a place? No, I'm staying here where I can get money and have friends." And I came home with my tail between my legs, obviously, and I'm completely and utterly stunned at how, even on social level, everything has changed. So the fact that the Irish, a golden age for trans literature, why the hell not? If there are people like us there, like the Trans Writers Union, who are prepared to share, then why not? We are proof that anything is possible, surely.
Yeah, definitely getting, I think, more things like this, and like I said, the mentorship with the Trans Writers Union and all sorts of things, I think are, at least, I know that I'm biased because I organize half of it, so I have to hope that it's working. But I think definitely kind of getting people in the room like this has been very valuable to, no offense to all of you, but just to talk to one another.
Yeah, I mean, fly on the wall, you can go gossip afterwards. But the thing is that this is an enormous privilege.
To the best of my knowledge, this is the first all-trans writing panel at a festival. We've had a few events that have included trans writers. All Irish trans, because there have been, the likes of Tory Peters and Sean Fay have done interviews. But I think this is kind of one of the first occasions that we've had all Irish trans writers.
That is amazing.
Yeah, right.
That is fucking radical. That's great.
Is Julianne here?
Being a first trans.
Yeah, bring it on.
This is so great, because my next question is on trans first. So that same article by Eli Kajini on I think it's called The Troubled Golden Age of Trans Literature. So Eli writes, "If we only ever talk about trans novels as new, interesting firsts, we obscure our legacy of violent suppression and collaborative survival." A bit of a downer, I won't lie. And then quotes Morgan Page, who says, "In order for trans people to be constantly discovered, we must always be immediately cast off or forgotten." So given that kind of conspicuous absence of trans people in Irish literature until today, do you think that we're liable to get our kind of hype about the first Irish trans novel or the first Irish trans, anything like that in the near future? So what do you think about the idea of trans first in that context? Are you kind of excited, or would you be wary of leading on that?
I'm bleeding. I feel like tearing out my hair with joy. Don't you?
Yeah.
I think why not both? I mean, I think you can actually say, you know, this is joyful. You know, this is something that we can celebrate, but not at the cost of actually saying that. What appears to be what is a first anyway. You know, what might appear to be a first actually has very deep roots in in a particular community and in a particular history. So we can use the visibility that we get from being a first, because you know the media likes firsts. You know, it's a story that you can sell. You can use that. You can kind of try and use that visibility to say, well, actually, there's a lot of hinterland behind us. There's a lot of community behind us. There's a lot of history behind us.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like there's I think Philippa Ryder recently published her memoir. She's
Sky Press, I think.
She's an Irish trans woman,
Yeah.
and I can't remember who. Sorry, who did
I
you say?
think it might have been Sky Press.
It could have been, could well have been. I'm not sure. You know, so you know there are books out there, and they are sort of they are sort of leaking out, but you know it's a slow process. And I mean, I would love to see the Great Irish Trans novel come out. You know, I think that would be really fascinating to see, and to see, because you know we have a strong literary heritage in this country, and I would just love to see that coming out. You know, it won't be from me because I just don't do fiction. But I think it's out there somewhere, and I'm just really looking forward to the day that's published.
Have you never considered doing kind of like an essay collection with your work?
Yeah, it's always running around in the back of my mind, you know. So I mean, but yeah, there's just so many things I want to talk about. But but then sometimes I find just talking about trans issues is exhausting because of what's happening at the moment in the UK and online around trans people. And you know, as a columnist with the journal, sometimes I feel responsibly that should I respond to that, or am I just giving it more promotion? You know, if I reply to these things, and you know, and it just gets exhausting after a while, and you just go, God, I don't want to write about trans issues all the bloody time. You know, I want to do something different. I want to write about stuff that I'm interested in. It's not just trans issues, you know.
I think it's interesting, the Philippa Ryder memoir, if I'm remembering right, is coming out with Skeen or Skine. Does anyone know? Does anyone here know?
Oh God, that's a good question.
Does anyone out there know?
Skine, Skeen.
Skeen. Okay. A little birdie's telling me it's Skeen.
Skeen then.
I believe it's with Skeen. If not, nobody fact check me on this. But Skeen would be kind of not one of the big three publishers, you know, and that was kind of a point of contention when Detransition Baby came out, is that there was a blurb line saying that it was like the first great, and you know, there was a whole lot of conversation about the first great trans realist novel, and obviously there had been a few trans realist novels before, but the kind of the difference was that Detransition Baby was with one of the
big publishers.
Yeah, like a big publisher, which kind of like made it the first great mainstream one. So yeah, do you see, like, have you had any feeling that like we're getting like a good kind of like indie almost trans? Because I feel that I'm seeing a lot of like great trans writers working with indies recently. Like they couldn't make it today on account of living in Glasgow. But Anna Walsh, the co-founder of the Trans Writers Union, who is also in So Hormonal, there's actually a few Irish authors in this, and there's myself, Kate Kiernan, and not Caitlin Kiernan, a different Kate Kiernan who's also trans, and Anna Walsh are all Irish trans authors who are in So Hormonal, which comes from Monstrous Regiment, which is also a kind of indie press. So yeah, have you had any like? Are you also getting those good vibes, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think indie press is where it's at the moment. You know, there's a lot of exciting writers out there, and that's where a lot of, that's where I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming in from. You know, and I think that's really fascinating. More so than than the big publishers, as you say. So yeah, those small, like Skeen Press, they do a lot of diversity stuff, and like Owen DeVardin's collection of stories was beautiful, and is it Rosaline McDonough as well?
Yes.
So I think they're doing wonderful work. But yeah, I mean, I think the indie presses they're the places to look out for. And also, Ireland has a great thing with literary magazines. So some
Yes.
great, check out the magazines like, Banshee and Dublin Inquirer, not Dublin Inquirer, what's it called? Dublin Literary Review, is it? Or,
Yes.
so those, take out a subscription to some of those. There's some great writing in there as well, and, and trans writers do pop up in those publications, so it's definitely worth checking them out.
And the Stinging Fly
Stinging Fly as well,
is
yeah.
quite good.
Yeah,
I got
absolutely.
one of their volumes, I think it was for the last one. I was really amazed.
I think I'm in that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What's it called?
The issue or the essay?
The essay.
Oh, the essay is called Boys Crying.
Oh, I must have a look at that.
Yeah.
No, fair play if you are.
Oh, thanks.
But I find that because I came back from Beijing and Thailand and all that, and kind of transplanted back into Ireland, I find it very difficult to find, and especially with COVID, trying to find even the proper publishing places, because it's all who you know, all you need to have contacts, the whole thing terribly isolated. So if anyone could let me know, it'd be great. But yeah.
I think for me, as kind of writing as a poet, I think there's really almost nothing else for the sort of poetry that I want to write than smaller presses. There isn't a lot of I'm not very interested in lots of ways in very mainstream poetry, but though that has shifted a bit. I mean, I'm seeing more, I suppose, slightly more experimental poetics happening in more traditionally mainstream venues. But really, I mean, it's not a matter of being anything to do with being trans. It's just if you want to write poetry that isn't relatively conventional, then small presses are where you are, and where you live, really. I think.
We also have one of Kit's books of poetry here, and all of these books here are on loan from the Small Trans Library. So if anyone in the audience is interested in reading them, I'm sorry for the live streamers, you're not here. But if anyone here in person would like to read more, you are free to borrow these from the library after the event. And I have one last kind of prepared question before we go to audience questions. So if you have anything brewing, I have a few from the live stream, but get thinking. Could you share a time that you have felt particularly happy when writing or doing something adjacent to writing, whether it relates to transness or not? Transness may or may not come into it. And just as an example, I recently was rewatching Interview with the Vampire, which has a...
Oh, I did too, yeah.
Fucking good. What a movie.
Yeah.
And it has a similar framing device to the novel that I'm writing, and I had that moment of being like, this fucking rules, and that means my thing's gonna fucking rule. These things that could be anywhere from writing something really good and being like, oh, I nailed this, to doing something extremely tangential and being like, I'm doing the right thing. Have you had kind of happy experiences like that?
I think the happy experience is when you finish what you're writing. For me, I don't know how the other people feel, but writing is a slog. It's hard work.
Very isolating.
And unlike Douglas Adams, who like to see the deadlines just fly by, I work better to deadlines because I panic for 6 days and then go, okay, I have to write this now by tomorrow, and then I just go and do it, and I just do it in a flurry, and that's just the way I work. But it's a very, very stressful way to work. So, I'm generally happy when I've written something and I send it off without rereading it, because I think it's okay, and generally, the editor will come back and go, yep, that's fine, that's grand, and I'll only reread it then when it's published, and I go, oh, that's actually okay. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I'm quite critical of my own writing. But yeah, my happiest time is when I've finished a writing project.
That's very fair. It's a huge relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything aside from brutalist architecture get you going?
Well, yeah, like Eva. I mean, it's like going to the gym or doing some exercise, isn't it? It's not very nice to be doing it, but having done it is amazing. I enjoy performing. I used to perform a lot. I sort of I didn't quite know that's what I was doing, but I sort of put performing on the back burner to transition. And now I'd like to, I'd like to perform more. So, if anyone is running a night, then I'm available. That's again though, it's having done it. I think, because you're almost, I think when you're performing, you're almost in a sort of, it's a positive state, but it's a dissociative state. You don't necessarily remember what you've done. And it's kind of having done it is a great high. So yeah, I'd like to go back into performing poems, I think.
All right.
Yeah, it's kind of a really, really good, positive dissociative state.
Yeah.
It's like when I write and I come out of the vision, the dream, and I say, I'm going to reward myself with a cup of coffee and a cigarette to notice that I've smoked 10 and I can't remember. And I think that for me is a great thing, to be able to be that focused on what you're doing. Because I was a performer too, and I am a performer, but because my voice is so aged in wood, I felt that I wasn't comfortable with that anymore and became a writer instead of a singer, because now is my ambition to be Ireland's answer to Marlene Dietrich. But anyway, that whole thing, I'm owning my own narrative for the first goddamn time in my life, and even though it has been a silent one, a silent ownership, I am delighted to be an Irish trans goddamn writer.
Yeah. So I'll go to audience questions now. I am getting reports that the Philippa Ryder book is by I'm going to have to ask for pronunciation again. Mercier. Don't look at me. The Philippa Ryder book is Mercier, not Skye. I'm skiing, fuck. So we have, I'll go with the online questions first. Do we have any from here? Okay, I'll start with the online questions and I'll come to the in-person audience. I don't have the name of the contributor. It just says that the message came a few seconds ago. So a few seconds ago says, so many mentions of brilliant books to add to my reading list, I can't keep up. Can you ask the panelists, in their opinion, what are their top 3 books to read in the golden age of Translit? I know, it's a toughie. How about top 3, as in you can give one each?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, well, detransition, baby. It's probably one of the best. It's probably the best novel I've read this year, and also it's probably the first novel I read where I actually thought the author has got trans people and got the sort of the subculture that trans people are involved in online in the 90s and stuff. I think it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful, and it's also very, very funny.
I'm going to go back and say I recently reread The Well of Loneliness, which I thought was which I was always told was a lesbian book. It's actually a book about, you actually find that it's a book about a trans man. It's not a happy book, and it's not from the golden age of trans writing. But I think it's important we go back and look at the history. And I think that's I think it got a reputation for being a very sentimental sort of and very morose kind of. Solemn, and it is in some ways. But there you go. I'm going to say something that's like it must be 100 years old at this stage, mustn't it? Nearly, very nearly. Radcliffe Hall.
The brutalism of transliterature. Fiona?
I suppose I'll go with Jane County. Why not? Man Enough to Be Woman, historical. Like she was there. I think she threw a rock during the Stonewall riots or something. And it is rollicking good tale. She doesn't take herself too seriously, but what she's writing about is serious. Good storytelling. That's what I would buy. It looks good on your shelf. Yeah, it does. It's a real poil. And that's the last thing you'd expect to hear in terms of like when you're talking about Jane County. But yeah, amazing.
No, I think I think if these books stand out to you, it's for a reason. Like I don't think there's any need to, try and dig deep and find, a niche book.
When you find the book actually speaks back to you.
Yeah, exactly.
When you find I've been, as we were saying about, I was going through Dunn's one day. It was like a shopping centre, and there was this like artisanal stall, and I connected with one of the people who were working there. I never met them before. A trans woman, and I was like, a trans woman working in artisanal stall in Dunn stores. Whatever about the golden age of literature. I mean, geez, that would have been unheard of. I mean, I remember looking aghast at two men kissing, much less myself walking down the street in a pair of heels in a sex shop dress. You know. So.
But I think that's interesting what Fiona's saying there, because I know growing up, like I scoured books for some sort of representation of trans people, and just to see somebody like me in there.
Yeah.
And then to read a book like Detransition Baby, where it's full of trans people and full of experiences that a lot of us have had as trans people. So I think it's wonderful to see that in literature nowadays.
Yeah, so you can feel it in your gut. It's something feeling that I'd never had before. To actually see, like, as she's serving, big slice of Moorbier cheese. It wasn't for me, by the way. And to actually, in their eyes, your own essence, either in someone's eyes or whether it's on the page. I mean, God damn it! I mean, amazing stuff.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I would highly recommend Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin, which should be out February next year, because I feel we've had a lot of like realist and nonfiction, but I'm here from the horror camp. Like, I'm a huge fan of trans horror writers, especially. We just did a trans horror event with the Small Trans Library, and there's some really amazing stuff. I'd recommend. You and me are going to talk after.
Yeah, but you see, I suppose we're going to have branch away from the whole nonfiction thing anyway. I feel like having written a memoir, it's like great for me and everything, but the rest of the world, oh God, another trans memoir, needed like a hole in the head.
But not from Ireland. Like, that's the thing, is it? I don't think we've had much of that. I think there is at least. I want to say it's Sarah Jane Cromwell has written a book.
Yeah, I think so.
About coming of age in Ireland as trans. I definitely have it on a page on the Small Trans Library website, so anyone fact check me by just looking at our website. But no, like, definitely we have had memoirs, but like, there's a reason that these things resonate with people. There's a reason that people write them in the first place. Like, nobody, I think, picks up a memoir thinking, this was written for me. They pick up a memoir to see, like, I wonder what Fiona has to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, like we're all products of our society. You know, we all grew up in an era where, where the Catholic Church ruled this country, and, I mean, things have changed drastically since then, so, and we're all, I was in the closet for a long time because there's no way I was going to come out as trans in this country,
Yeah.
So it took a long time before I felt comfortable enough to declare my transness,
Absolutely. Yeah.
But doing it in public on stage, baby, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. We have one other from the live stream chat who just this question too. Would the panelists have any advice about navigating Irish publishing as a trans writer? I feel this might be a hard one because I don't know if, like, I've probably been out as trans for, I think, not the longest period of time, but in the span of my writing career, I've been out as trans the entire time that I was writing. But I know, Kate, you were saying that you've had that kind of disparity. So yeah, like, what would be, like, do you have, I feel like we have very mixed experiences of how much transness has come into it.
Just write. I would say just write, and just start putting your stuff online if you can, and just it's the only way you're going to get noticed, I think, and then
get your 6 fans in America.
We'll get your 6 fans in America and take it from there.
A good home philosophy is required here, I think.
But submit to those journals that we were talking about. Stinging Fly, Banshee, Dublin Literary Review, all of those. Just start putting your work out there if you can.
Yeah.
I think my advice for trans writers is generally just that, like, in publishing, like, it is, like, yes, there can be some pitfalls, but there are so many good people who are, like, really, like, trying their best to be inclusive, and that, like, you can find them and you will have a great time. Like, again, I had a great publishing experience with The Stinging Fly, so I can personally say, like, that was lovely, and that, like, it doesn't have to feel like a burden or an obstacle, you know?
And I think publishers are becoming much more aware of trans people and also trans characters. Like I've, coincidentally, in the last couple of weeks, I've been asked to be a sensitivity reader for 2 works, and because they have trans characters in it, and the publishers they want to make sure that those trans characters are treated sensitively, So I think that's very positive, I think,
Also, that question was asked by Kel, who I believe is Kel Menton, who's one of the, and if it's a different Kel, I'm sorry, but I'm just stealing your name. I don't know how many Kels we have in the chat, but Kel is one of the not trans delegates, the young writer delegates to the festival who are having a showcase, I believe, tomorrow evening. And they are a non-binary writer. And I would just, if on the topic of Irish trans writers, like I would highly recommend checking their work out and watching their reading tomorrow. And then we had, sorry, the lights are so bright. Oh yeah, sorry. We have a couple. Okay, sorry, I said to you, I don't. Perfect, yeah.
I have a question. My name is Tapasya. I'm a kid student from UCU. I just finished a PhD under him, which is also dedicated to.
Congrats.
So, thanks. I just want to ask that where do you, is there a problem when you look for literary inspiration? Like Elaine Kudunon said that there was a need to see role models. So like within Irish canon, there was very little representation of women which bothered her. So I wonder if it bothers you that this, or are you happy being pioneers, or is there somewhere you can get inspiration from?
Yeah, are you bothered not having a kind of forebears that you know of, or are you?
Not really.
No, I think it's important that people are visible. I think kind of visibility, and that you know that it's a possibility. But I think that applies to all sorts of people. I think one of the things that I did before I came out was to start up an experimental poetry kind of performance night. And I wondered why I hadn't done it years before, but it was just that somebody else had moved to Dublin who I could collaborate with, and we said, well, why don't we do it? And we said, well, it was kind of that feeling of, well, do we need to be endorsed in some way, validated? And I think that's what people are sort of looking for, permission. And as a trans person, I think you often feel that you need permission from some sort of external authority to transition. It doesn't work like that. The first step anyway always has to be made by yourself. You have to do what Fiona did today and say, here I am. This is me. And it's sort of the same with writing. In fact, no one is really going to give you permission. You've always got to make that first step yourself. No one's going to sort of kind of dub you a writer before you write anything. So I think in a way that's more important than seeing necessarily a four bears in some way. I think again as trans people and queer people more generally, the whole kind of metaphor of a forebears of generations. They are very family based, very sort of heterosexually based kind of metaphors of birth, of fathers and mothers in that sort of way. So I think if you don't have to be trans. I think if you're queer in any way, that's complicated anyway. That kind of metaphor isn't quite so available, and we have to make new metaphors for community and history, and I think we do.
Just to repeat, just because I think the live stream didn't hear that too clearly, just the question was, does it bother you not having kind of any forebears in trans writing, or are you happy to be pioneers in the genre? I think personally speaking, one of my sticking points is that like it's a weird double-edged sword where like on the one hand being the kind of the one of the first or one of the pioneers means that you'd have to do so much explaining over and over, which is I hope this is all right. I was talking about this event with Julianne, and we talked about potentially combining it with an event that was on the book Queer Love, but I asked Julianne, could we keep it an all trans panel? Because the dynamic changes so immediately as soon as you kind of have at least one cis person in the panel who you sort of have to mediate through, and who the audience, if they are majority cis, will kind of de facto see through, because they won't have that, they'll feel sort of alienated, whereas if it is all trans people, you just have this kind of more unfiltered conversation, in my experience, at least. That's my experience. So kind of being the first means, being one of the pioneers means that you get so many more questions, and you have to put so much time and energy into starting a fucking union instead of just doing the writing that you want to do. But like we said, it's extremely marketable.
Yeah,
So
and you have to make the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's a commitment, just like being trans is a commitment when it comes down to it. And for me, writing is my attempt, as I said, like to own my own narrative. And it's also the resolution of an old schism that I'd going on. So, and storytelling, tell your story. I mean, try to be proud of yourself. I wasn't always proud of myself, but I have to admit now, at this point in time, I'm quite proud. So
Yeah. That's what Aoife's essay in the bank program, it's called Stories, and it's very much about storytelling.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important to tell our stories, I think, and to get those stories out there, because for too long trans people haven't been represented, like we haven't been represented, or if we are represented, we're represented negatively, like as I say in the essay in the program, I say that, the first trans people I saw on television were either serial killers or victims of serial killers, and that's not who we are, and I craved that representation. Like, I would read those books just to see a trans person, no matter how negatively they were portrayed. But negative portrayal is just as bad as no portrayal,
Yeah. Well, there's a strand of the vaudevillian in society yet. Yeah. Because, I mean, like, I always think that the worst one I ever saw was it Ace Ventura 2 with Sean Young.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
that's the ba-dum-ps, really.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
But now we're here.
Yeah.
Fuck Ace
Fuck
Ventura.
Ace
We got.
Yeah.
Don't get enough times to mind meld with people and say fuck Ace Ventura.
Fuck Ace Ventura, damn him. Jim Carrey's overrated anyway.
So true. I think we have a couple of questions. We'll go to you first, in the second from the front there. We have a mic coming, I think.
Great. I just wanted to say that, trans stories are, gaining traction, especially in countries that have the sort of financial power to broadcast them. Like places like America, for example, who has a massive film and literature scene. And some elements of the stories are universal, but what are some elements that you would say are very, very specific to the Irish trans experience? And I just wanted to make a side note, since we're talking about submitting to literary journals. Rope's Literary Journal in Galway, I work on it. We're accepting submissions right now. We would love to see your work.
Thank you.
Repeat that again, sorry.
The question?
No. Who did you work for?
Rope's Literary Journal.
Ropes.
Ropes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You'll be hearing from me.
So what are unique aspects of the Irish trans experience in your... I'm really thinking.
Yeah, I find myself very affected by the Catholic Church and its influence in my life when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think the repression, I grew up in Ireland I know I don't look it, but I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And, everything, that was when even being gay was illegal in this country, and, we now live in an Ireland where we have same-sex marriage, we have, access to abortion, we have the Gender Recognition Act. So, the country I live in now is a vastly different country to the one I grew up in. But there was that repression and shame. Like, there was absolutely no way in the 70s or 80s I could have come out as trans, because I was just too ashamed of myself, and that shame just permeated society. It was awful to me. And one of the things that, being trans, I go, well, at least I'm not gay, I thought to myself, because at that time it was horrible to be gay. You were just made feel so ashamed of your sexuality and your gender identity. So I think that's probably that certainly influenced a lot of what I do. And it influences why I write what I write and why I speak publicly about being trans, because, you know, shame is wrong. We shouldn't be ashamed for who we are, you know.
Yeah, and it affects so many people, not just trans people. That's definitely one of my bugbears. The fact that they attack everything elemental about a person. The Christians, and that would be part of my literature, is like trying to high kick against that kind of thing.
And then did either of us grow up in Ireland?
No, I didn't grow up in Ireland,
Yeah, me
so
neither.
I can't speak about that. But one of the things that I think is positive about it is that dreadful kind of imperialist rationalism that has fueled so much transphobia in Britain and on the so-called British left is not so much a feature of Irish life. I think Irish people know better. That ghastly. I remember someone asking me, what is with kind of the British transphobia, and I didn't, why is it? And I replied without even thinking, imperialism, and that's what it is. It's that terrible sense of that terrible sense of knowing best. That sense of kind of unthink, and it's it crosses political boundaries in a left-right sense. That sort of ghastly. That sort of ghastly sensible thing in British culture. I'm very, very familiar with that. And it's something that's not overwhelmingly a feature of Irish life. And when people try it, it has that sort of West Brit kind of trying to be like a sensible. Certain newspapers, for example, exude it to a degree. It's recognised, I think, for the foolish performance that it is. So I think that's something that's very positive. About. There are many things that are not positive, healthcare being one. But I think that's something that's that sort of bossy, sensible rationalism of British culture is not really a feature of Irish life to any great extent.
Yeah, personally, I was born here, but then moved away and moved back when I was 12. So I missed a lot of kind of childhood in Ireland.
Lucky you.
To anyone who's getting the audio version later on, I just got a subtle thumbs up from Fiona. But I came back in time for secondary school, and definitely one of the biggest changes for me, there's a few things, France is very secular, so for one, I had a Catholic friend in France, and that was weird. So to find out, I was like, oh my god, people are actually Catholic here, not for a joke. That's wild. And then school uniforms, that was probably one of my biggest shocks to the system, because we didn't have uniforms in France. And then I think that was sort of not necessarily that didn't make me trans, but there's definitely a universe where I wasn't so kind of rigidly put into the category of girl in a way that I hadn't necessarily been in France. I had just kind of been allowed to express myself how I wanted. But as soon as you put a skirt on, I'm like, well, something's weird about this. This is strange. Yeah.
I felt when I used to be wearing the boys' uniform, I always say being an altar boy kind of gave me kind of my sartorial taste. But I know that the teenage years can be a harrowing experience for any sensitive person. That whole uniform thing, absolute erasure as a human being.
Yeah, that's my. I already have so many battles to fight, but we'll get to the uniform one. I'll make an anti-uniform.
I didn't
union
even consider the uniform a battle. No, I do. Thank you, Jim.
I'm so sorry. Everything's a battle. I think we had another question in the. Did you have a question in the red sweater?
Come on.
No. Okay, no, that's fine. We're already over, so that's fine.
Are we? Oh, sorry.
I think that's everything. Do you have any closing I definitely would recommend people go to the Young Writer Delegates thing on Monday night, because I'm very proud of them, because I also was a Young Writer Delegate in the past, and I'm just really glad to see that they're out and about. Yeah, any parting words?
No, I mean, it's just been an absolute pleasure to be here and to be on the panel with such great trans writers.
Illustrious
and
individuals.
Illustrious individuals.
Where can people find all of your works?
You can, if you just Google my name online, you'll find, I've
That's such a power play.
I know, it's mortifying. Yeah, just if you Google my name, you'll find lots of articles that I've written, for various publications. But mostly I write for the journal now. So although it's been a while, I've had health issues this year, so I haven't written as much as I'd like to. But hopefully we'll get back to it again soon.
Yeah, my book Body Servant is published by Shearsman Books, which you can buy online. I've also got some work in a new anthology which I'd like to publicise called Queering the Green, which is...
I didn't know you were in that.
Yeah.
How exciting.
It's an anthology of 21st century, post-2000 queer writing from Ireland, which is published by Lifeboat Books in Belfast.
I can be found on Medium under medium.com under Fiona Lee, Leigh, and I've also written a memoir, a sex, drink and dumplings story, a rollicking tale of going around in Asia as a transgender human being, and I also will be in the trans anthology.
Yes, yeah.
As well. I've written about what I consider one of the real pioneers.
Oh.
I've short-circuited. Anyway, yeah, one of the first ever, there were two transgender pioneers for our cause in Cork in the 80s and 90s. I can't remember their names, but there were two very, 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 very brave individuals. And I've written about one of them, because what they're getting on the street now, what they were getting on the street then, I'm actually getting on the street now, so
I don't know
household goddesses there.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't have many details about that anthology yet, but it should be coming out in the near future. It's edited by edited by Anna Walsh, Kate Kieran, and Anne Nahanda Mbire, and it is funded by the Arts Council. I don't know that it has a title yet, but it will be Ireland's. Again, I believe it's a first, but Ireland's first anthology of trans writing. So very looking forward to that.
Yes.
Yeah, and obviously all these books are available in the Small Trans Library, and you can see the rest of our catalogue at smalltranslibrary.org, and the Trans Writers Union is at transwritersunion.com, where you can see all of our wonderful work, which is how I got in contact with all these beautiful people as members of the union.
What a
Thank you,
great
James.
job.
Thank you.
There should be some sort of, opening for you in RT or something. That was actually really good. I couldn't do that.
Thanks. Fiona, you
Oh my
just
God,
did
you
my
scared
job.
me.
I just want to say a huge thank you to our panel and to James. An amazing job. Absolutely brilliant. And if you're right, and it is a first, all trans panel, I'm absolutely honoured to have had it. We should do it every year. So next year will be the anthology. So I'm really excited about that. But thank you, and it's so wonderful to hear your stories, and they're so important. The feedback on from people at home has been so good. Saying Jenny said, I'll probably get this wrong, but Jenny said richly warm and witty conversation. And another was saying how it had such great energy and hope. And that's what these panels and these conversations and bringing people together is so important. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as James mentioned, if you want to borrow a book, I'm lending out your books. We have lots more events today. You mentioned Scheme Press a lot and Stinging Fly. Yeah, Play It Forward is on at 2:00 today. So there's tickets still. It's free if you'd like to go upstairs. That should be really, really, really good. I'm looking forward to that. And you're lucky you said nice things, because I think Declan from Stinging Fly was online. So hi, Declan. But thank you all so much. All right, thank you very much.